concept of secularism, Dharmanirpekshatavad, has emerged and accepted by almost all countries, few countries where there is still the rule of religion. As we know that even our Constitution of India has also accepted from beginning the concept of or the principle of secularism. Some people often keep on saying that we accepted or adopted the concept of secularism when we amended the Constitution of India and added two words which were not found in the original Constitution. The words are socialist and secularist. However, this is not correctly understood position of our Constitution, because our Constitution is inherently a secular Constitution, which we can find from various provisions in the Constitution of India, such as the concept of equality, which is the hallmark of today's democracy, and the fundamental right to have freedom of conscience, which allows you to follow no religion if you want so, or to follow any religion if you want so. It is all a fundamental right, and that is beyond the even legislative reach of any majority government. That means that you have been given your complete freedom of conscience as to whether to follow any religion or not to follow any religion. So these are our constitutional inherent provisions which make our constitution as inherently secular constitution. Now let us see how this secularism has emerged, how this concept, this principle, this doctrine has come into effect or has come to be accepted by majority of the countries in the world. It is said that this concept or this principle started gaining its ground immediately after the Black Death, which entered into the world in the year 1348, and soon it spread across the globe, and thereby it killed around 60% of then population of the world. And that very happening, that was a pandemic, like today we are facing a corona pandemic. That time it was a Black Death. It was a kind of influenza, it was kind of a plague, but more famously it is known as Black Death in the history. You may be surprised that the pandemic of Black Death killed almost everyone, including the popes or the agents of popes who used to boast that they have answer to every worldly problem. Even during those days, the poperies were selling the tickets to reserve your seat into heaven, and the tickets for heaven were auctioned like today we auction the property after the order of the court in execution proceeding. During those days, the popery used to have auction of tickets for going to or securing your position into the heaven. Even such kind of popes who boasted that they can send you directly or they can maintain your position into the heaven were also killed in the pandemic of Black Death. And that's how people started thinking that these popes who always claimed that they had every answer to every problem, every question, also succumbed to the Black Death. That means they were lying. And that is how the popery or the rule of religion got exposed, and people started questioning, people started applying their logic, reason before they believed into any such propaganda being done by then poperies. That compelled people to question the religious dogmas, and that started a process in the world, and that is famously known as the period of Renaissance or the age of enlightenment, or in Marathi we say Prabodhan Kal. So that was the process which started in the world, and during that process many people came from many aspects. Scientists came, literature field also produced so many literaries, and social activists, politicians, many people. So out of that process, one fellow whose name is Charles Bradlaugh, who was born into London, England, in the year 1833, and he died in the year 1891. You may not have heard of this personality, great personality, Bradlaugh. He has a lot of contribution to what we call today as secularism, because this person was elected as a member of parliament, that is British Parliament, in the year 1880. Now during those days, it was a rule of parliament business that anyone who gets elected as member of parliament has to take oath in the name of God, and he has to declare that he has allegiance to the king. As we know, in Britain, Great Britain, even today also, for nominal purpose, there is a king or queen who is the ultimate head of the nation. So during those days, the member of parliament was required by the rule to take oath in the name of God. Now interestingly, this Bradlaugh was a declared atheist. He personally did not believe into the God. When he got elected, and when he was asked to take oath in the name of God and to show his allegiance to the King of England, he refused. He said, since he didn't believe in the God, since he didn't worship the God, since he didn't accept the existence of God, it was futile on his part to take false oath in the name of God. So he declined, and he said that instead of taking oath in the name of God, he should be allowed to simply take affirmation. Now let me clarify the difference between affirmation and oath of God, in the name of God. Affirmation would simply mean, as we today see in various courts, we affirm the petitions or applications or affidavits. We say, I so and so do hereby declare that whatever is stated in paras foregoing is true and correct to the best of my knowledge. So you will find no word of God into this affirmation. Affirmation in the oath in the name of God would be, I do swear in the name of God that I will do so and so, so and so. So this is the basic difference you must keep in the mind. So MPs were compelled by the rule to say that they swear in the name of God that they do have allegiance to the King of England. So this Bradlaugh refused to do so, and consequently he was not allowed to assume his seat of MP into the Parliament of Great Britain, which necessarily forced a by-election. And in the by-election also, second time again the Bradlaugh got elected. Again he was compelled to take oath in the name of God, and again Mr. Bradlaugh refused to take oath in the name of God, saying that since he did not accept the existence of God, it was very much futile on his part to take a false kind of oath. Again he was not allowed to take his seat into Parliament of Great Britain, and that forced another by-election. Again, surprisingly, Bradlaugh got elected. This was third time that Bradlaugh got elected. Again, this third time also he was compelled by the rule that he cannot be allowed to assume his position or seat into parliament, or he cannot take participate into the business of parliament unless he takes oath in the name of God. As we see, the Bradlaugh was a hardest atheist. Even this time also he didn't accept, and he refused to take oath in the name of God. Again, necessarily this also compelled a by-election, and in this by-election also, again surprisingly, this very Bradlaugh got elected. So this kept on happening several times, and almost it went on at least 5 to 6 times that he used to get elected as MP, and he was directed to take oath in the name of God, and he used to refuse to take oath in the name of God, saying that he didn't believe in the God, therefore it was false oath if he takes so. Then this was happening. Finally he was directed by a rule that he must take oath, because he cannot keep on playing with the parliamentary procedure by causing the by-election one after another. That time also he was put to a notice that if he didn't take the oath in the name of God, then he would be imprisoned, because that would amount to contempting the parliament. And of course he didn't accept that also. Consequently, he was put into jail for having contempted the parliamentary order, parliamentary directions. Even that did not change the determination of this great personality, Bradlaugh. And thereafter he was released after serving whatever period of imprisonment that was. Again he got elected. Now this somewhere compelled the parliamentary rules or parliamentary authorities of that time and the others that he should be allowed to take affirmation in the name of his own conscience instead of God. And it was made clear that if anybody challenged the same into the court, saying that it was not a valid or legal oath that he took, or the affirmation that he took, because it was prima facie against the then existing rules of parliament, and subject to such condition, he was allowed to take affirmation. And then he was the perhaps first man into the history of British Parliament to take affirmation before entering into a British Parliament as member of Parliament. He was a great man. He was a foreseer. He understood. He was having some mission, and he was so sharp that immediately after entering into the Parliament as MP, he brought a private bill into the Parliament of India. What was that private bill? That private bill was an amendment into the existing law, that is Oaths Act. And he convinced all the parliamentarians or the members of parliament that it should be left to the option of individuals whether they would like to take oath in the name of God, or whether they would like to simply affirm in their own conscience. And very fortunately, this private bill suggested or brought in by this Bradlaugh was passed into the Parliament of British, and that became the law of Britain. And friends, this changed the very scenario of people looking at the things. This was acceptance of your conscience publicly, that you should not be forced to believe into the God. And this Bradlaugh was the disciple of one Mr. Holyoake, and this Holyoake and this Bradlaugh made the very ideology as the movement of their era. In this we find that this was the actually acceptance of secularism. These very two personalities, that is Holyoake and Bradlaugh, had coined the word secularism. More especially it was Holyoake, but then it was taken ahead by this Bradlaugh by practically acting on that principle in his own life, as I have described now. So secularism in fact is nothing but political naming of atheism or materialism, because as we know that those who did not believe into God were branded as Nastik, atheist, kufr, something like that in almost all religions, and therefore people used to get this atheist or Nastik as a kind of negative or a kind of abuse given by the believers. Therefore this holy act and this bad law found it necessary to have some word which may not be which may not be felt as abusive word like Nastik or atheist. So they have formulated, they have coined, they have created this new word, that is secularism. So secularism philosophically is nothing but atheism, and politically it is atheism. In fact, atheism politically defined is nothing but secularism. Now what is the impact of this secularism? Even recently I came to know that a country where almost more than 90% population is of Muslim origin or Muslim religion, like country like Turkey. Turkey is a secular country, declared a secular country, and it is a beauty of constitution of Turkey that the duty has been cast upon the military army of Turkey, that whenever there was any danger to the secular fabric of Turkey, then the military would take the charge and protect their constitution and its secularism. Many people may not be believing in this, but this is a fact that many a times the rulers or the politicians tried to finish the secularism, but military took charge and they defended the constitution and the fabric of secularism into Turkey. And during this process, I think one of the person who is Ataturk, who is considered to be a dictator, but however he is the exception to the meaning of dictator, because he may be the only dictator the world has witnessed, that he has done good, that he has done everything for the public and the welfare of the public. Someday I would take a special session on such kind of personalities who have done great things and who are the Mahapurush, great personalities, having done something great, public good for the humanity, human service, etc. But today let me point his short contribution into this process. So this secularism now is universally accepted, barring few countries, as I said. And let us now examine our Indian constitution. In India, we find that there are thousands of various people, languages, dialects and written languages, because we know that after every 50 years or something near about, we find the very tone and tenor of language gets changed. So in that people speak different language. In Marathi also we find different parts of Maharashtra, case of every language. So we have several races, several castes, several languages, several religions for that matter, several panth, several denominations. Despite that, several states, several different territories. Despite all this diversity, we call diversity, what is it that has kept us together? What is that which has kept us together and we still believe that we are Indians? Dear friends, it is the only secular fabric of this country, the constitution of this country, which compels every one of us to think that we are Indian. And this secular fabric is very essential for our country to be united and to have integrity and unity. Just for example, In one of the judgments, the Honorable Supreme Court has referred to the China, because in China you find almost every Chinese face would be similar, resembling, and people like us would not be in position to even differentiate two different Chinese, because their faces are almost same, and they speak the same language. That language is called as Mandarin language. So this is the Chinese example, because China is having the same everything same. They have almost all Chinese are having similarity. But in India, we are a country of diversity. That is how the concept of secularism has successfully managed to put us together into the Indianness, because if we keep on claiming that our own identity is different and we are superior, somebody else is inferior, then in that case this would lead to clashes into the groups, and it would be hazardous to see that our country will not be integral, united. So the makers of constitution have thought it very essential to give such a principle to us, so that we would continue. We say that our goal of constitution is to have the fraternity, unity, integrity, and with that, of course, individual dignity. So these are the goals of our constitution, and for achieving all these goals of our constitution, we need the concept of secularism. And till now we have been successfully managing our country with this concept of secularism, and it is the duty of each and every one of us, every individual, every Indian who claims to be a patriot, to maintain this fabric of our country, that is secularism, because that is the only thing that will keep us together, and unity is the power. With this togetherness and unity, I don't think that any country in the world would be in position to even look at us. And as our history shows us very negative aspects, because we were ruled by foreign attackers for a long time, and we must learn something from that, and we must stay together, and for that we need the concept of doctrine of secularism. And we just simply do not need to respect in the books. We need to inculcate that principle into our daily living. We should behave with secular fabric in every day of our daily life, wherever we are doing. Our religion, our religious dogmas should not be coming with us when we leave our home. It should be kept at our home when we enter the society, when we enter the public life. And dear friends, with that, I would like to stop here. Thank you.